So what has the pandemic resulted for most of us? One, too many meetings with too many people taking too much time. It's been interesting because studies have accounted that the average meeting account has increased by 13% compared to pre-pandemic levels. The number of attendees has also increased by about 14% per meeting. And then our work days likewise have increased by 8% per day. That's about 50 minutes of more meeting time than we had before. But even though we have so many meetings, what else has resulted? At least for me, and what studies have shown is like there's also this deep loss of connection, which on a practical work aspect, it leads to a lack of understanding of the full picture, whether that be updates or these conversations that we have in passing in the office, things like that. And it also has led to kind of this increased distance, both physically, we're no longer in the same spot, but also emotionally. How do we connect? How do we make those relationships? And this both physically not being next to each other, but also perceived, since there's this higher barrier to communication. At least for my team, it is now a bigger effort to be like, oh, I need to sync with you on this. I have to set up a Zoom meeting, blah, blah, blah. It's just not that much fun. All right. So what is the industry doing? What are people doing right now? If we look and we can see some of these big logos like Salesforce and Dropbox, industry leaders are changing and adapting how they work. For instance, Salesforce, they're doing these 3 options. One is flex. You can go to the office 1 to 3 days per week for team collaboration, et cetera, right? Presentations. Another alternative, if you don't live near the office, or you're in a role that doesn't require you being in the office, well, full-time remote, that works. Or this last one is like, this is probably the smallest population of their workforce will work from an office location 4 to 5 days a week. So once again, this normal of working in person every day, that's going to be the minority of Salesforce's workforce. If we look at Dropbox, they've shifted to a virtual first philosophy for all employees. So that's now the default, whereas the exception now is these more like Dropbox studios, where there's these collaborative spaces in like the large cities where you can like get together if you need to foster community building within the org, et cetera. So really interesting that both of these companies are like, hey, this is going to stick around forever. What can we do to anticipate this new normal? McKinsey recently came out with a study. Well, it's been a number of months now, but from thinking about the next normal to making it work, what to stop, start, and accelerate. And what are their points? One is stop assuming the old ways will come back. That will permanently change how we work, how our clients work, how our it's going to be different. Second, we have to organize and anticipate working with a distributed team and workforce in general. Okay. Third is that we need to transition to agility. What does this mean? Like be able to pivot, be able to adapt, and go quickly with what you're trying to do to anticipate what will come. So agile, we often think about in the software development, but it also is kind of a mindset. It's a different way of working. How can we adapt to what we're learning? How can we release in chunks and iterate and learn along the way? McKinsey calls agile the way to reconfigure strategy, structure, processes, people, and technology quickly. Once again, learn and adapt, iterate, right? These agile principles. And last, this point from McKinsey is accelerate best practices for collaboration. What does that mean? Okay, so best practices, one thing that complicates this is one, business expectations and complexity are higher than ever. The industry and the world is just changing at a rapid pace. Anywhere teams demand collaboration solutions that work anywhere, anytime, right? It's no longer, I can turn around in my desk and talk to the person behind me. I have to demand these solutions wherever they are. And last, agility requires a shared vision, coordination, and flexible collaboration. Okay, so let's double down on this just even a little bit more. Communication. What do we have to do to anticipate the best practices? we have to shift from like emails and in-person meetings to Slack, MS Teams, right? Video everywhere. And then we think about collaboration. We used to use a lot of whiteboards and PowerPoints, and you have to go and meetings all the time, right? You have to go more into like, how do you get all these in the same spot? How can we have a tool that allows this visual collaboration to get those nuances, both in our relationship with each other, but also those nuances of connection of ideas as we work better together in the future. Okay. So the goal of part of this discussion is that distributed teams, the goal is to have them thrive and not just survive. We need to do more than just survive remote work. We need to thrive in remote work, right? And we need to transform our endless meetings to a deeper team collaboration and connection. All right. So today, I'm going to illustrate this and kind of give some practical tips and tricks that hopefully you can apply in 3 types of team collaboration, okay? First is ad hoc collaborative sessions. Second is are these facilitated, prepared collaborations with your team. And third, which is probably the most complex, is a distributed war room. So all of these have a time and place. It doesn't mean you guys at your different work of employment use all of these, but we want to make sure that you can see these principles and make sure they're actually effective and really driving work forward. Okay, so let's start with our first one, ad hoc collaborative sessions. What do we mean by ad hoc collaborative sessions? So these are often one-off meetings around a specific topic or discussion. So if we think about the pre-remote, pre-pandemic world, right? Sometimes you create this giant, they're just notes. They're on the whiteboard, right? They are conference room discussions. They're physical whiteboards. And at least for me and my team, it's like, I'm the one that's drawing on the whiteboard. And then it's like, oh yeah, we came to a conclusion that made sense, right? And we're gonna take a picture and then go figure out what to do with that. For me, oftentimes it is Google Docs with meeting notes and what did we do and what did we discuss? They're often initiated with like, hey, I turn around to the desk, hey, let's discuss this really quickly. Or they could even be, hey, we're gonna schedule a meeting, right? We're gonna discuss this one topic. So what does it look like and what are the challenges we're experiencing with ad hoc meetings now in a distributed remote environment? Okay. So one, it is difficult to collaborate simultaneously. In a conference room, you can often, if it's a group of 3 or 4 or 5, right? You can easily just jump in and talk and things like that. And it's clear that you want to talk too, oftentimes by body language. In a remote way, that's a lot more difficult. You have to pause oftentimes to let people unmute, to let them come in. There's a higher activation energy to collaborate. So collaborating simultaneously, remote, you can't have 3 people, 2 people even talking at the same time. Whereas in person, it's a lot easier to manage. Okay. 2, there are many different levels of engagement and participation. People aren't, similar to the last one, people are not necessarily willing to jump in. And because people are always looking at their screen now, at least for me, I'm guilty of this. I have Slack up on one side, right? I've got my email on the other. Maybe I'm working on slides. I am often multitasking, right? I am not listening all the way. And if I am too, like there's just more energy needed to engage and participate. What is happening then? It's creating silos. This lack of communication, lack of thought is that people are not bringing their domain expertise and their knowledge always to the discussion, which they should be. So we are siloing our knowledge and our communication, which is, as we all know, not great for collaboration, not great for getting work done. Next, it's hard to efficiently synthesize ideas. This is a problem that happened even pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, where let's imagine that our ad hoc session is actually a brainstorm or something like that, right? It's hard to get all the ideas together, make sense of them, and drive towards action. And that's where it gets to this last point of lack of clear next steps. This last one is also exists in every meeting, even pre-pandemic, and something that needs to be on our forefront. How do we get everyone engaged, right? How do we get everyone's knowledge so they're not siloing? How do we get them focused? And then how do we get their ideas and synthesize it, make sense of it, and drive towards action? Okay. So let's avoid these common pitfalls. So one is, here's some suggestions. Transform unengaging calls into team visual collaboration. And what do we mean by that, right? It is what we have found to be successful is find a common platform or tool or technology or norms, right? Where people can come in and give their ideas. And if you do so, if you invite them to, you get more engagement actually. Two, have a shared location for knowledge. Establish those norms because whether you are remote, where are we going for this activity? Where are we going for this knowledge? Or even asynchronous, right? When you have someone overseas or a different, continent than you are, how do you have this asynchronous knowledge together in one shared spot? Third, have shared communication channels. Fourth, invite people to participate. People are less willing to jump in, so you must invite them now. And then always end meetings with a clear next step and action items. And when we think about these technologies, right, figure out what works with your company and canonize them. Could be Slack, MS Teams, Google Hangout. There's so many, right? But we really just need to engage them in a shared platform that has knowledge, communication, and collaboration where possible. Okay, let's go through a case study. Okay, so this has recently happened with with one of my teams. We were trying to create an integration strategy, right? How our product hooked in with other products. Now we have people from strategy, from product marketing, from analytics to really come and discuss in this ad hoc meeting what we should do. Initially, people were talking over each other, and then everyone stopped talking, and it was hard to focus, hard to get on the same page. And this was early in on the pandemic, right? So what did we do? We went to our common norms. We went to, this is a product that we have called Lucid Spark, which is like a very large collaborative, visual, and digital whiteboard for teams to kind of get all on the same page. So we jumped into Lucid Spark, right? And what did we do? We invited everyone to contribute. So you can see a bunch of these different colors that people actually in Lucid Spark, you can assign different people colors so you know whose is what. And you see that we just started collaborating, right? We started getting our ideas out and invited people, getting those domain expertise, getting that collaboration. But also you can see these little comment things, right? The communication is, you could do it synchronously when we're talking out loud. And this nuance asynchronous where I don't need to tell you what I'm thinking, but I can comment you and get your feedback on this area so that we can get on the same page. And it became even more effective. And in fact, we actually liked the virtual world because oftentimes in a physical world, the loudest voice takes the most airtime and they only get their ideas. Whereas digitally, it's like, hey, everyone contribute, everyone's ideas are on the board. There's parity, there's equality, there's equity, right? You can really evaluate different segments really quickly. The other thing is, another great downstream thing is like, hey, once again, try to foster those team connections. If people are engaging, they will also want to engage in connection. So you can see someone drew, well, we actually all contributed. Someone was drawing a Christmas tree and so other people started adding ornaments, right? Where it was literally a 15-second, like just random occurrence, but that made the team go closer together, even though we are in so many different locations and time zones, et cetera. Okay. Let's go to our next meeting type. This is facilitated, prepared, and collaborative meetings. What do we mean by this? Okay. So these are meetings that are designed to draw people's ideas out and input. So some examples, right? You have a brainstorming session, big room planning sessions with engineering, right? OKR planning where you're trying to distill in your goals. There is sprint planning, solutioning, design sprints. These are just a couple of them where there's a defined purpose, there's a start and an end and a goal always in mind, okay? So prepared sessions often look like this type of format. One, pre-work, right? If you're doing a brainstorming session, one of the best practices is, hey, here's the prompts we will be asking you during this brainstorming session. Come already thinking through it, right? Maybe generate 3 ideas and we'll generate more ideas together. Okay. 2, oftentimes you have the agenda on the screen in the conference room where you know exactly here's what we're doing at this sections of time. Okay. 3, you're driving towards discussion, right? You're trying to get everyone incorporated and get their ideas. 4, you're driving the agenda as a facilitator, right? And last, you're getting action items. One thing to know about these meetings, right? Facilitated often means there's one person leading and many people participating. That's typically, there's a lot of nuance. You can have a formalized kind of facilitator, like this is my meeting, this activity we will be conducting on this quarterly planning, whatever. Or you can have kind of these ad hoc de facto type of facilitations where no one's quite facilitating, right? So then I'm going to step up and make sure that we get things done. Okay, so what are the common pitfalls here? This happens all the time. Unprepared teams and facilitators. Oh man, I cannot tell you the number of meetings I've been in where I come out with, what are we trying to do in this meeting, right? The person conducting the meeting isn't prepared. Flip side, if you're the facilitator, I've sent out the pre-read material, I've given you your prompt to think about, and no one has done any of it, right? They've not prepared for the meeting. Okay. Another issue is poor time management. If you have a start and an end of what you're trying to accomplish in this meeting, if you only get through halfway through what you're trying to do by the end of the meeting, not the best. So the facilitator must be really good making sure that they are managing the time properly. This third one, as always, unengaged participants. This happens very frequently, as we know. Fourth, difficulty synthesizing ideas. We kind of mentioned this before, but I'll double down on this one. If you're brainstorming a facilitated way, I have been that facilitator where we've had a really great facilitated brainstorm. We've gotten 200 plus ideas, sticky notes on the board, right? The pain actually is when you're trying to make sense of those 200 sticky notes. It's often me being like, I have this sticky note. Anyone else have this sticky note, right? Oh, it's terrible. Oftentimes, I just kick everyone out of the room. It's like, okay, I will synthesize these 200 sticky notes and I will present them to you guys with what we should be doing, right? Which is like 4 hours of work. It's really taxing. And then this last one is difficulty deciding on how to take action once again. Okay. So how do we avoid these pitfalls? Assign pre-work and set the stage, right? I am going to send the agenda 24 hours in advance. And when I start the meeting, it's like, everyone, let's get on the same page. We are trying to do X, Y, Z. Next step, I show the agenda, right? And what we're doing here. This is an example. The third one, when you're doing a facility, especially with people who don't know each other, start with icebreakers. Even if it's a random fun question, the one we just did with my team was, everyone go to the last photo on your phone and show what it is. Of course, make it PG rated. But it was fun to see, like, one of my coworkers I didn't know had an ultrasound picture and they were pregnant, right? It's just a great way to kind of engage, connect, and get the ideas flowing, actually. This fourth point, make sure every voice is heard. Once again, this is an advantage that we have virtually, is like, if you have a platform, it's easier to get everyone's voice heard, not just the loudest person in the room. As a facilitator, I know this for me, I'm a loud voice if you can't tell. I like to make sure that if I haven't heard from a certain domain expertise or a certain individual, I'm like, hey, blah, blah, blah person, I would love to get your thoughts on this. Anything as we are discussing that would be helpful to know that we haven't touched on, right? Fifth, time bucket activities. With your agenda, nice to have a nice schedule, right? And as always, determine next steps and synthesize and summarize what those next steps are. Okay. Let's go with a case study. This case study was a quarterly strategic planning by one of our customers, Bamboo HR. So the CEO, Brad, he was pretty worried. He had to do a 3-year strategy planning session virtually. And these planning sessions are difficult in general when you're in person, let alone COVID just hit. How do they do this virtually, right? So they had this technology, Lucid Spark, that is a product of Lucid. And they came in, right? And they did those things, right? They had the agenda in the notes. They had sticky notes. They were, as you can see here, these color coordinated things where people knew whose sticky notes were what. And then when they went to go synthesize, they could go vote on the best idea, right? They could prioritize. They could, we had this feature in Lucid Spark where we call it gather and sort, that say I voted on all these different things. This is a nice little interface, but what if I want to interact with those? So I can sort all the sticky notes with the votes into different buckets and to quickly talk about and to get those next action items and things like that. And what happened is ultimately this drove meeting engagement, increased productivity, and really alignment on how to move forward, which ultimately what we want to do in any meeting, let alone in this new environment. Okay. Let's go to this last one, virtual war rooms. Not everyone's familiar with war rooms, but this is one of, I call it the mother of all meetings, right? There's often a centralized space where key people meet together to solve a difficult problem. Often involves iteration, it takes multiple sessions over time. So what are the classic examples, right? A strategic planning session for multiple years. Pre-mortem exercises where you just want to generate and iterate, right? Release planning, bigger than planning, competitive and analysis. How do you actually conduct these? Well, in the physical world, you would literally take over a conference room for like a week or multiple days. We call this the war room. You present the meeting objectives initially. It's like, okay, maybe we're doing competitive analysis. This group, you guys are in charge of being this. You are representing this competitor and in this space. What are you doing in 3 years? You guys are our company, right? What are you doing in 3 years? You guys are the market. What disasters could come up? Side note, I don't know if anyone predicted a pandemic, but this is what you would do in a war room, right? And this person, right? Let's say you are disruption to the new entrants in the market, whatever, okay? You break out into small groups, they go off and work around, you come back together at different points, discuss, synthesize, right? And then you often go back out, come back in, go back out, come back in, until the end of it, you have done all of this discussion and planning, etc. And this war room often seeds, you know, maybe it's a year, like other teams go afterwards on that war room to really go drive towards more action. Okay. So what are the common pitfalls of a virtual war room? There is no centralized space. You no longer literally have the physical war room, right? This is a recurring theme. It's time intensive to do synthesis. This is even worse in a normal brainstorming session because there are oftentimes there could be hundreds of people involved, right? If it's a really large war room. There's no single source of truth. It's really related to the centralized workspace, whereas in the war room, that is your single source of truth. Now that there's no physical spot, people are doing it into their different, like I'm doing Google Docs, I'm doing Lucid Spark, whatever. It's not a single source of truth. And then, as always, it's difficult to do things in a remote world. Okay, so how do you avoid these pitfalls? One is find the technology. This is so important. It's important in all of these use cases, but this one's even more important, right? Is find the technology that supports effective team collaboration. Because the more people you get in a remote world, the more complex it is and more necessary to have that technology actually be there. Second, use technology to augment what you do in real life. Take advantage of the strengths of a virtual world, right? Like we mentioned before, for instance, elevating everyone's voice equally. That is something we take advantage more of now than we did before. And third, whenever you do a war room, it is a big meeting. Make sure you are prepared. Okay. So case study here. This is a large manufacturing company. Once again, their yearly strategic planning session, they actually had 200 plus director level and above individuals that they had to do this yearly planning, right? So how did they do this? With Lucid Spark, what they did is we've got something called breakout boards. So they opened up this panel, and basically you have the initial board is what became their centralized space. It became what we call their motherboard, right? Their war room. And then these breakout rooms were the more of these small groups that really took place and to iterate, go back together and bring, talk things through. And you can call people back and forth, similar to Zoom has breakout rooms, right? MS Teams does, and it's bringing them back. And then the nice thing also kind of about the synthesis stuff, I mentioned to you before about all the synthesis stuff that we have in facilitation, but I can actually drag these breakout boards into the main board and it'll bring that content. So you have the main board and these breakout boards and you're synthesizing across the board back and forth. And what happens, right? More engaging and productive than they have been in months. That's such a great thing for us to hear. But once again, the technology has to support what you're doing. Okay. So let's wrap up. Key takeaways: remote work, hybrid work, the new normal, it's here to stay in some form. But what's happened, right? What do we need to solve? Meetings have increased, collaboration has decreased, and we need to change these habits to not just survive, but thrive in the new world. Okay. So how do we do this? One is we have to focus on increasing team engagement and collaboration. And if we do, it will build trust and likewise keep our teams and our work moving forward. Then this last one, I've kind of talked about this a lot, is figure out those norms for your company. Canonize on the technology and have it be the platform where you can more effectively and efficiently work together. Make sure it supports team collaboration across the board. Make sure that there are a system of record of information. Make sure communication channels are also there. Okay. So hopefully these tips are helpful as you guys anticipate, as you thrive in the new normal and really get to what is happening in this new world. And thanks so much for having me here. And I hope you guys